A friend of mine once told me a story. I don't know if this story is actually true, but it was a story that made an impact on me and it stuck with me, and so I come back to it every now and then. My friend was sitting in a train ride once, in a coupe just like that one. He was sitting opposite facing other chairs where two gentlemen were having a conversation. And these two gentlemen, they were having a conversation about something my friend knew everything about, everything there is to know about that subject. They were having a conversation about Bassi and Adriaan. Now, I'm assuming most of you have no clue what Bassi and Adriaan is. Bassi and Adriaan were huge in the Netherlands. It's a childhood television series from the 80s. And my friend knew everything there was to know about Bassi and Adriaan. So these two gentlemen, they were having a conversation about this childhood memory. And what's so interesting about this television series is at the end, when they were in their final seasons, it was big. They made a lot of money. They shot episodes in America and in Spain. But when they were starting out, they were very, very low budget. They were so low budget, in fact, that my friend knew a little cool fact about them. So as these two gentlemen were having this conversation, my friend leaned forward, interrupted their conversation. And he told these two gentlemen, did you guys know that the actors that play Bassi and Adriaan, that they also play the evil supervillains? And these people were mind blown. They had no idea. Their childhood memory just got a whole new set of colors. And the rest of the train started joining in. They were exchanging other childhood memories, having generally a good time, and the whole train ride was one pleasant experience. Now, I think this story is very beautiful, especially because usually when I interrupt people, things get very ugly. I want to give you today the developer's model for talking to managers. This will be a talk about talking. A conversation about conversation, a chat about chat. But it comes with a little bit of a warning, because this talk is meant to make you somewhat uncomfortable. Because sometimes conversations aren't so comfortable. But that happens for a reason. And that's what we're going to dive into today. But before we're going to do that, we're going to do a little bit of science. If I may ask the lights to be somewhat dimmed, because I want to see your hands. We're going to do a little bit of an experiment, and I want you to participate. I'm going to pose 3 scenarios, and each scenario with 3 different options, and I want to see your hands if you think it's a bad idea, and then if you think it's a good idea. We're going to go back into the train. You are sitting on that very place that my friend was sitting at. But instead of Bassi and Adriaan, the 2 gentlemen in front of you are talking about programming, which of course you know everything about. And one of these people is telling something to the other that you know is wrong. Now, there's no bad intention, but it's wrong. So, of course, you lean over, you interrupt, and you say, hey, you said this, it's actually that. Who thinks that's a bad idea? Raise your hands. All right. And who thinks that's a good idea? Raise your hands. Oh, this is settled science. Most of you think this is a bad idea. Okay. So, another option. Instead, you lean over and you interrupt them and you say, excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear that you were discussing this. I'm a programmer myself, I know something about this subject. You said this thing, it's actually that thing. Who thinks that's a bad idea? And who thinks that's a good idea? All right, this is almost settled science, it's somewhat settled. Most people think this is on the verge of being a good idea. Okay, how about this? Instead, you interrupt them and you say, hey, I'm sorry, I couldn't help but overhear. You were talking about this subject. I'm a programmer myself. I know a lot about this. Would it be okay if I made a comment? Who thinks that's a bad idea? And who thinks that's a good idea? Excellent. This is interesting. You can tell, by the way, that this isn't actual science because I'm not writing anything down. It's writing down that makes it science. Okay, so that was one scenario, 3 options, 2 scenarios left. Instead of in the train, you are now a senior programmer on a team of 3. 1 junior, 1 meteor programmer. And you overhear the meteor programmer explaining something to the junior programmer that you know is not true. Again, no bad intention. You lean in and say, hey, I heard you say this, it's actually that. Bad idea. A good idea. All right. Instead of that, you lean in and you say, hey, sorry, I couldn't help but overhear. I know a lot about this subject. You said this thing, it's actually the other thing. Who thinks that's a bad idea? Who thinks that's a good idea? Ooh, very similar results. That's interesting. Okay, and instead, you lean over, you interrupt, and you say, hey, I couldn't help but overhear. I know a lot about this subject myself. Would it be okay if I, the senior developer, make a comment? Who thinks that's a bad idea? And a good idea? Ah, interesting, interesting. All right, one more scenario. Stay with me. You are working on a project, and the salesperson that's involved in that project is talking to your manager about that project, and they're saying something that you know is not true. Again, no bad intention. Your salesperson is saying something to your manager about your project that you are working on, and you know it's not true, no bad intention. You interrupt and you say, hey, I heard you say that thing, it's actually that thing. Who thinks that's a bad idea? Who thinks that's a good idea? Ooh, very mixed, this one. Okay, instead, you interrupt and you say, hey, I couldn't help but overhear. You were talking about this project. I'm on this project, so I know something about this. You were saying this thing. That's not true. It's actually that thing. Who thinks that's a bad idea? So someone was very adamant about this one. And who thinks that's a good idea? Many of you. Very interesting. And the final one, you interrupt. You say, hey, I couldn't help but overhear. You're talking about this project. I'm on this project. I know about this project. Would it be okay if I made a comment? Bad idea. Hey, good idea. Interesting, interesting. All right. Now, we all have some mechanisms in our mind that make us choose the one thing over the other. When you are faced with the choice in your actual moment, it's happening right now, what do? You have to do something. These options aren't presented to you, so you're going to pick the one that comes natural to you. But when you're here and you can think about it a little bit, especially if you've already heard the options from the previous scenario. Maybe you choose a little differently, but I guess in most scenarios I would choose quite similar to you. But why? What's so special about this one scenario that we choose differently from the other scenario? So I would say, just thinking about this a little bit. So when you're in the train, you're talking to complete strangers. You're all just people on a train. Why should they believe anything you have to say? Why should they care about what you have to say? We're all strangers to each other. So in that instance, usually, I guess you would go for the most safest option unless you want to bump some heads. What's interesting in the second scenario with the developers in the same team, you'll have an established relationship. You're all developers in the team. That's quite special. In fact, you are the senior developer, and that comes with responsibilities. It comes with the responsibility to make sure that the others don't hurt themselves. It's a little bit like watching your kid run into traffic, maybe. So it wouldn't be so bad to be quite direct in that scenario. Nice, but direct. Whereas in the third scenario, you're all working for the same company, but you're in different roles, different expectations maybe, so it would be maybe a little bit more safe than with your own team, but not so safe, I guess you could say, as with strangers on the train. Now, all these different things that you could think about, well, it's like this, and it's like this, and it's roles, and it's... I just garbled them all together in one simple definition that I like to call distance. So if we look at this very simple model, then you could say that the distance between ourselves and the rest of our team is not so big. But the distance between ourselves and strangers on the train, with all kinds of variables being involved in there, is quite big. So I guess you could say that the further away people are from you with all these variables taken into account, then the less influence we have. It's harder for us to influence these other people. And it's vice versa. The closer they are to us, the easier it is to influence these people. And what do I mean by influence? Well, by influence, I mean how much energy do you have to invest to make these other people think about things the way you think about them? Now, this is an analog scale, and that's kind of hard to work with. So there's another model that makes it a little bit easier to think about how far away you are from your current situation. Maybe you've heard of this model. It's called sphere of influence. Sphere of influence. So closest to you is what's called your sphere of control. That means you actively participate in how decisions get made. You're not the only one to decide per se, but you are an active decider. In your sphere of influence, however, you're not an active decider, you're more of a passive decider. The people who are active deciders in that sphere will consult you. They will ask you your opinion. So for example, in your own team, you could say, I think we should go do DDD, we should do domain-driven design. And your team can have an argument with you about it, but you get a vote. Whereas if you try to get your whole company to do domain-driven design, that will be a bit harder, right? Now imagine that you're working in a very big company. Like it would be almost impossible to get the company to do domain-driven design. You're just a cog in the machine. But if the company decides to do domain-driven design, then that does concern you. It influences you. So again, in this model, whether you are in your sphere of control, sphere of influence, or sphere of concern, matters greatly to how much energy you need to invest to get something done. So I would say, if you ever face one of these situations where you have to argue with people, think about this model. Where are you? Are you arguing in your sphere of control? Go for it. Are you arguing in your sphere of concern? Well, that might be tough. Another way of looking at it is to say, it's a very, very old quote, Lord, grant me the strength to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the thing I can, and the wisdom to know which is which. Don't spend energy on things we really can't change. Focus on the things we can change. Let's play another little game of bad idea, good idea. Imagine a sales representative coming up to you. You had an estimation on a new project a little while ago, and you estimated this project would take you 8 weeks. And your sales rep comes up to you and says, hey, listen, I know we had that conversation about that new project, right? I know you said 8 weeks, but I sold it for 5 weeks because, you developers, you always overestimate anyway, right? Is that a good idea by your sales rep? A bad idea. Let's do bad idea first. Is that a good idea? I want to talk to you afterwards and understand. Yeah. So what if your sales rep, what if they came up to you instead and said, look, I had a hard time selling this project for 8 weeks. So yeah, I sold it for 5 weeks. We put 8 weeks in the planning, but you can tell the customer about these other 3 weeks. Bad idea. Good idea? What if instead your sales rep comes up to you and says, listen, this customer, I know we said it was going to take 8 weeks. We could only sell 5. That's their maximum budget. But we really believe in their idea. We think that their plans can work. We want to work with them. So we are going to invest the other 3 weeks. Bad idea? Good idea. Oh, that's very interesting. So just as a side note, this is like a little bit meta. This question varies wildly across different countries. Like in the Netherlands, everyone's, oh, this is a horrible idea. What if we can't make it? And what if? Whereas here, it's all, yeah, okay, it's their choice. Very interesting. Cultural differences, maybe. If anyone feels like coming up afterwards and talking to me about this one, I'd be absolutely fascinated why this to you is a good idea. Now imagine your sales rep come up to you and say, sold it for 5 because you overestimate anyway. What do you do? What do you do? Get angry. Yeah, flip tables. What do you do? Well, you just say no, right? You just say no. I think the worst thing you can do is say, okay, and just wait it out. It's only 8 weeks. We'll see what happens after. I think one step up from saying yes and doing no is saying yes and doing yes. Okay, we'll try. We'll do overtime. We'll work really hard. And then the next customer, we also work really hard. And the next customer, we also work really hard. This is going to crash and burn, right? We can only do so much. So if we overpromise and try to deliver, that's going to be really tough. And I think the next least usefulest is to say no and do no. Say no and do no. Has anyone seen the movie Office Space? See a couple of people going, huh? Yeah. Office Space is a great movie to watch. If you've never seen it, I highly recommend watching Office Space. Office Space is, in my opinion, like a typical 90s view on developer culture. Developers are total victims of the corporation, and they just, they have all these managers, and they're just telling them what to do. And somewhere in the past 10 years, developers have become a very scarce resource. And that means that we can charge a lot of money and pick where we want to work and that kind of thing. And then suddenly developers started really saying no. And that's good. It's better than saying yes. It's better than saying no and doing, yeah. But I think there's still a problem with saying no. See, I only have 2 salespeople at my work, but they're really good. I can remember a couple of meetings where I was walking into that meeting, I'm going to say no. And I walked out of the meeting thinking, what happened? What? And it's weird because both of them are completely different. One is like, yeah, we'll do it. And the other one's like, oh, that's interesting, tell me more. And I feel like he listens to me, and afterwards, I still did what he wanted. What? How did it happen? Salespeople and managers are trained to get everyone to do what they want. They're trained to turn no into yes. So if I say no, I lose. I don't want to lose. Maybe that's not the best way to look at it. I want to help. They're not coming to me because they want me to feel bad. They want to sell that project. So if they come up to me and say, oh, we sold it in 5 and you do with it. Okay, well, you know what we could do? We could say we only have 5 weeks of time. Okay, well, maybe we can talk to the client and see if there's more features we can cut. Maybe we can find another way to get some more time in there. Maybe we can see if there's something we can do with how much time in our weeks we spend. Maybe we can spend some time on other things. There's all kinds of ideas that I could come up with, and maybe the salesperson also has some other idea. So I try to do like the judo thing, right? They come at me and I try to swing it with them. use their own force against them, kind of to say. But if I say no, oh, that's going to be a confrontation. And most of us, yeah, that's a little bit facetious, but most of us became developers because we're very bad with confrontation and people. We just want to confront with the machine and compiler. Maybe that wasn't the best idea either. So I say the best thing to do is to negotiate, to help, work together. And that might take a couple of times before your salespeople kind of understand that as well, but I think that's the best way to go. So if your salesperson comes up to you and says, listen, that 8-week project, I could only sell 5. What should I do? Wouldn't that be wonderful? I think it would be wonderful. Let's turn it around a little bit. Imagine it's reversed. So the salesperson is actually good at his job, and I'm not. And I'm going to my salesperson. We sold this 8-week project for 8 weeks because he's that good. And I come up to him after 8 weeks and say, listen, you need to sell more sprints because we're not going to make it. Who thinks that's a bad idea? Who thinks that's a good idea? Who's checked out? So if instead of coming up to him after 8 weeks, I come up to him after 7 weeks and say, look, we're not going to make it. You need to sell more sprints. Who thinks that's a bad idea? And who thinks that's a good idea? 6 weeks? What if after 5 weeks, or maybe even 4 weeks, I come up to my salesperson and I say, look, we estimated it was going to be 8 weeks. We messed up. We're not going to make it. I need your help. Is there anything that you see possible to do with the budget or with the time or with the features? Can you help me? Who thinks that's a good idea? That's pretty good, right? And then your salesperson says no. I don't know how about you, but I feel that. I need help. I came up to you because I messed up. Okay, I messed up, but I need help. Help me. No is really, really hard. So I would say, unless you really have to, don't say no. Let's do a little bit of role play. Imagine the following scenario. I've been working on an API for about 2 weeks. Customer spec, everything was completely written out. I finished it. It was exactly up to spec. 2 weeks delivered. Everything was good. It's Monday after those 2 sprints. I'm preparing to go home. And my boss just got off the phone with the client. They're not happy. Either the specs were wrong, something else went wrong. It's not my fault, but the client's not happy. And my boss, at the very end of the day, as I'm preparing to leave, comes into my office. Hey, listen, man. You were working on that API last week, right? Oh, man. Oh, I just got off the phone with the customer. Man, they are not happy. Ooh. I don't know what to do, man. Oh, they're threatening to cancel their account. Oh, what do I do? What do I do? And I'm just standing there like, is there something I can do to help? Oh, yes, please help me. Please, if you could get the team together and I'll order a couple of pizzas and we can fix this tonight. But I can't tonight. It's my girlfriend's birthday. Oh, no, please, you have to help me. Come on. Please. One down. Three scenarios to go. Stay with me. Hey, you were working on an API last week, right? Oh, I just got off the phone with the client. They're not very happy, but I think we can still fix it. How about you get the team together, I'll order us a couple of pizzas, and we can still fix this. What do you say? What? No, I can't. It's my girlfriend's birthday tonight. Oh, no, come on. You don't want to let the team down, do you? Don't be a party pooper. Come on. I'll get a couple of pizzas. We got this thing cracking. What do you say? Hey, you were working on that API last week, right? I just got off the phone with the client. They're not very happy with your work. Ooh, they're threatening to cancel their account, actually. But I think you can still fix this. How about you get the team together? I'll get a couple of pizzas and we can fix this. What do you say? Oh, no, I can't. It's my girlfriend's birthday tonight. Oh, do you think that's wise? Final one. Hey, you were working on an API last week, right? I got off the phone with the client. They're not happy. Get the team together. I'll get a couple of pizzas. Fix this. I can't. It's my girlfriend's birthday tonight. It's your girlfriend's birthday tonight. You get the team together and you fix this! No! Sorry. And end scene. 4 scenarios. 4 ways that conversations can go wrong in very particular ways. Oh, thank you. So what happened here? There is a theory called the ego state model. And the ego state model is a way of looking at how people are in a conversation. Now, normally most people are in what's called their adult state. It's when they're not particularly affected by what's ever going on. But sometimes when a stressor occurs, when people feel, for example, threatened by a client canceling their account, they can go into what's called the child state. In the child state, we tend to behave as we did when we were younger. And there are basically 2 ways that that can occur. One says we go into what is called the adapted child state. And when that happens, we tend to want to fit in and do exactly what we're told. We can also go into the rebellious mode, which is exactly the opposite. We tend to want to act out and just not fit in at all. So the first scenario that we saw, he's not fitting in. Things are going wrong and it's out of his control. Well, in the second scenario, we saw the guy who says, yeah, whatever, rules. Yeah, just do some overtime, right? In the final 2 scenarios, we saw one go into the parent state. In the parent state, we tend to behave as adults did when we were young. And that also has 2 perspectives. One can go into nurturing, which means we tend to be very protective and caring and the other one is judging, which is when we tend to want others to conform to what we're saying. Now, there's another model I want to show you. This model might be a little bit more familiar to most of you. I'm going to do another short demonstration. Typing. Fixing that stupid bug. Why won't it work? And then my coworker comes into the room and he sees me working. You okay there, buddy? Stupid bug. I can't find why this isn't just working. Oh, did you try that one thing? Yes, I tried it. Thank you. Okay. And did you try that other thing? Yes, I tried the other thing. It didn't work. Okay. And how about that? Look, I wasn't asking for your help, so just back off, okay? Oh, well, excuse me, you're the one who's making the room all comfortable. I'm the one making the room uncomfortable. I was perfectly fine until you entered. Oh, geez, man, I'm sorry. Okay, fine, I'll go. Now raise your hands if that's completely unfamiliar to you. Good, that makes me happy. It's not unfamiliar to me, sadly. But it's interesting to see this kind of conversation play out. Because what tends to happen here? Someone's frustrated. And they go down into what's called the victim role. You know, the circumstances and the things and the that, and it's all their fault. It's not my fault. And I'm basically asking for help in all ways except actually asking for help. And then someone comes in and he feels that. And he's like, oh, what are you? He wants to get rid of that nasty feeling. So they go into what's called the rescuer mode. And they want to rescue the victim. Now that goes back and forth a couple of times until the victim's had enough. And then goes up to persecutor. And he starts persecuting the rescuer, who in himself goes into what's called the persecutor, until finally one of those backs down and leaves the room. This is an example of what's called a game. From Eric Burns' book, it's a pretty old book called Games People Play. This game is called Why Don't You Yes But? It's an example of many games like this. I'll show you a link at the end if you want to know more about this. The question is, why do we do these things? How does it happen to us? In order for that, we need to look at our brain. We have two conflicting parts in our brain. We have our prefrontal cortex, which is basically the little center in our brain that's responsible for keeping us rational. And we have another center in our brain called the amygdala, which is responsible for regulating our emotions. And these two parts are basically an eternal tug of war. Usually, it's pretty much normal, nothing going on. But then something occurs and our amygdala tends to flare up. Sometimes you feel it, right? You get that shot of adrenaline. That's when your amygdala starts pumping up. Now, when that happens, you have 2 seconds. You have 2 seconds to say, 2 seconds to say, okay. 2 seconds to say, I'll think about it. I'll get back to you. I'll talk to my team about it. I'll have to ask my neighbor's mom's dog. 2 seconds to not lose the tug of war. But this is hard, because this happens all the time. And it's not always bad, but it happens all the time. So it goes mostly unnoticed. So if you start paying attention to this, the first time it maybe take months. Like months later, you're just, getting your bike from the shed and suddenly you think, oh, that's what happened that time. And next time it'll be weeks. And then it'll be days. And then it'll be minutes. And before you know it, someone is presenting you with a stressor and you're going to, I'll get back to you tomorrow. And walk out. We started with this distance model. Out of everything that you can influence or even control, what's closest to you is you. So this conference is coming to an end. You've seen and heard a lot of new things, made some new connections, perhaps even made a couple of friends. What's going to change for you Monday? How is this conference going to impact your life? We're all human beings, working for human beings, helping human beings. And the way that we communicate through software or outside of our software influences the way that people feel, influences the way people behave. It influences the world. It changes the world. So if you don't have an idea yourself yet on what you want to do Monday, I have one for you. I have a mission for you. Whether you're working on your own huge cathedral of a project with thousands of visitors, or whether you're working on a small chapel in the middle of nowhere for maybe only 10 faithful believers. Your work matters because it influences people. You influence people. So I want you Monday to be an example for your team, for your boss, for your customers, for strangers on a train. I want you to be a shining beacon using the developer's model for talking to managers. Thank you.